This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey, Ma. It's just midnight, Sunday night. And I've just finished watching Orphan, 2009 Jean-Colette Serra movie. Have a bit of a weird thing where I've been a big fan of movies since the late 90s and have stayed for most of that time pretty on top of new releases coming out. But in my early 20s, I traveled a hell of a lot, and I'd be often quite far afield, out of Europe, out of the English-speaking world, sort of pre-internet, certainly pre-like streaming services and stuff. And there's a range of years where I didn't see every movie coming out. I'd see the movies that big, significant directors put out, like David Fincher or whoever, because I'd catch up with them later whenever I made it back to Europe. But you're kind of month in, month out new releases. I often find I have blind spots. Now, Orphan came out in 2009, and I think combination of it being, or at least on the surface seeming to be like a bit of a cookie cutter, trashy horror movie, and the point in my life when it came out, it's a film that I've never seen, and I've always kind of been aware that it exists. I've seen the poster, and I guess there's always new horror movies coming out, and they've got their poster, and you kind of, they're almost designed to have you look at the poster and know what you're in for, in a way. They're like, the last thing they want in their marketing is ambiguity. They want like, this is this type of movie that you already kind of are comfortable with and know, come along, have a look at it kind of thing. And I'm more into that kind of movie now. I think over the years, I've become a bigger and bigger fan of horror, to the point of having an appreciation for more or less every single strand of horror, from like the most sort of trashy, mass-produced type of commercial horror to more interesting, subversive, experimental horror movies, to really old horror movies, kids horror movies, everything. But at the time when Orphan came out, I can imagine it being the type of movie that just wouldn't have cut through the noise. And yeah, is only in more recent years when I started doing watching a horror movie every day in October, that I've started to catch up with some of these films. Now, weirdly, I'm looking at Jean-Colette Serra's IMDb, and he made this film in 2009. Since that film was released, I've seen 6 films by him. The 6 films that he made after Orphan. And, some of them are better than others, but sort of taken as a body of work, they've been entertaining and stylish enough for him to have kind of risen through the ranks and become my favorite schlock filmmaker. So it's weird now, after years of liking his work and almost like seeking out his work, I look forward to a new Jean-Colette Serra movie. I'm now finally, what is it? 15 years after its release, I'm now finally catching up with what I see on IMDb is highest rated movie. I really, really liked Orphan. It has one aspect of it, one plot, subplot, or plot element, one trope that runs through the movie that I really don't like. That's just something that I find very tiresome and I struggle to get through whenever it's in a movie, which it frequently is. And that's no one will believe the protagonist. So they can't solve the problem because the people closest to them and their, closest confidence don't just think they're crazy or whatever. And if only people believe them, then that would be the end of the movie kind of thing. But no one believes them. I find that a really hard thing to get right. And I don't think this film gets it right. But outside of that personal pet peeve of mine, I think this is an absolutely fantastic movie. So I have been very tired lately, and watching a horror film every night, I've often found myself quite tired and like, oh man, I wish I had either started it earlier or just had more energy in me because it looks like a good movie, but I'm sort of struggling to stay awake. I started this one at 10 o'clock, which is quite late for me starting a movie. Started probably 10:30. So, and I was wired the whole way through this movie. I wasn't, I mean, you might be able to tell now I'm still wired. Like, that movie was just such an entertaining film. And what Colette Serra brings to movies, and certainly to his Liam Neeson movies he's done, is he massively elevates schlocky material with really stylish camera work and also with just a sustained energy and a sustained sense of entertainment. And as much as I've thought that of a number of his films in the past, this film is, I do feel it might be his masterpiece. Now it is that classic, there's a creepy kid. I mean, that's the genre, isn't it? There's a creepy kid. Basically, that is, you don't even have to elaborate beyond that. There's a creepy kid is a subgenre of horror / subgenre of thriller that we get them every now and again over the years. And I'm going into a film like that a bit trepidatious. Because because anything that's sort of played out and has been kind of, we've been rehashing it for forever, you're a bit like, okay, well, are you going to give me anything novel in this movie? Are you going to give me anything unique? Because if you're not, you're going to have to really fucking smash it with the filmmaking. Because if you're certainly not going to give me the shock of, can you believe it, a little kid is evil? Because once you've seen a few of those, once you've seen that a few times, that's no longer a shot in and of itself. So I'm a bit concerned going in. And the other thing that makes me a bit concerned is early in this movie, I'm thinking, now we've had this conversation many times, and this subject matter could almost suffocate our conversation about this film. But I'm thinking, is it exploitative, or is it going to leave a bad taste in my mouth? The idea of, like, you adopt a kid, you don't know what their background is, they could be crazy, and then I don't know, there's just something, I don't quite know how to put it in words, because it's not like I'm not approaching that purely from some like high horse moralistic, like, films can always have to have real world values or something. I get that you can make really effective horror films that seem to, well, that latch into a kind of ugly fear or paranoia that people have. Like, so the stepfather is a good example of that. I think there's, you know, millions and millions and millions of people out there who are step parents, who are wonderful, lovely parents to their children. But I get that it makes sense that you're going to make a horror film called The Stepfather about like how what are the scare potentials of someone of an unknown background coming into your home. And early in this film, like, is it a bit like in poor taste almost to like have a movie where they go to an orphanage, they get a little kid, but the little kid is bad. And I don't know, I had some misgivings about that. And then the first 40 minutes or so of the movie, before I forget the name of the kid now, I've only just watched the movie, but before the orphan kills CCH Pounder, and in other words, before you know like how far she'll go. I mean, you kind of can assume because you're watching a horror movie and you're like, well, it's obviously got to escalate. But before it really goes full tilt into this kid is just evil, just pure fucking evil. Up until that point, I'm feeling a lot of sympathy for the kid because I'm like, she's obviously troubled and has, you know, some sort of mental health issues, but is this going to be a film where I feel almost more like I'm on the side of Esther, the girl, because I'm feeling sympathy for her because of like she's a product of trauma. Really bad, horrible things have happened to her. They don't make a point of not showing her neck and her wrists, and you know, we can assume from a very early point that that's hiding scarring. And I don't know whether it's me bringing this to the film or whether the film is trying to make you feel this, but it seems to me like she's a scarred in a you know, metaphorical sense child that's really been through the ringer and been through incredibly hard times, and that the film is going to go, she's been through such torture that she's just crazy and therefore she's dangerous, but I'm going to spend the whole movie kind of more just sympathetic to her rather than afraid of her. And then the film goes, no, she is just a complete sadist, like killer. Like she delights in exacting pain and torture and terror on those around her, and they kind of turn her into more of a one-dimensional horror villain at that point. And then it becomes a more of a straightforward thriller of Vera Farmiga versus the world, really, because everything's kind of going against her, but certainly versus this girl, Esther. And then, quite early in the movie, I start theorizing that maybe she's not a little girl, that she just looks like a little girl, but she is, that she's an adult. And the reason that popped into my head is because there's a comedian called, I think he's called Andy Milonakis, and he was kind of popular in the 2000s on like MTV and stuff like that. He has a hormone growth disorder or something that makes him look like a kid, and his voice is like a kid, but he's old, like he's in his 40s or whatever. And so he kind of monetized that and started doing interviews on the street where people felt like they were interacting with a kid, but he was able to say things and, you know, do things, I guess, that someone that looked like that shouldn't be able to. So it was, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it was quite a trippy and funny end product. And that physical disorder, which is very rare and I think very dangerous. I think if you have that, you're not supposed to live that long. So it's incredibly rare, but it's very rare that you even survive long enough. I'm not sure if that's exactly what this Esther character is supposed to have, or if it's more of just like the screenwriters didn't even bother to like pin it to a real specific thing. They do say proportional dwarfism, but I don't think that hides your aging as well. Anyway, it's kind of irrelevant, but because of that comedian and then kind of becoming aware of that illness, and I think then over the years learning of a couple of other people out there who have it, I made the connection, or at least made the theory that she was an adult. And once I got that, I was like back on board, because the one-dimensional villain that's like evil kid is not very interesting to me. It's fine if the filmmaking is good and you do good scenes, which this film repeatedly does, but the idea of adult pretending to be kid getting adopted into your home as one of your kids that you read a bedtime story and you put down at night, and you buy little dresses for them and you buy toys for them and you take them to the playground, and all this while you're hanging out with a fucking adult. That is genius. Like that is just a brilliant idea. There's no two ways about it. That is genius screenwriting. So yeah, it kind of started off. I started off a little bit like, I don't know. I'm not sure about this. Am I going to get what this film wants to give me, or am I just like the wrong audience for exploiting fears of like, yeah, if you adopt someone, it could be anyone. And then when it goes to she's just an evil kid, then I'm for a little while I'm like, okay, all right, it's a little bit flat now. It was more interesting when we were like unsure what she was like, and that was very interesting navigating that. And then when I started to work out, which again was quite early in the movie, that she might not even be a kid, then that's when the whole thing just like is wrapped up in a bow, and I'm just loving it conceptually from then on out. Now, that's me grappling with the kind of central concept of the movie. Beyond that, just talking about how the actual storytelling in this film is fantastic, in my opinion. I think I don't know how this film isn't higher rated than it is. I see it's got a 7 on IMDb, and it's recently had a sequel, or prequel, I think, actually, which is funny because the actress came back and now she's like, I guess in her 20s, 30s, I don't know, but she's playing a younger version of the character, which obviously this is one of the only, but might be the only example in film history where you can have a child actor grow up and then play a younger version than they were when they were a child, and it still actually somehow work on a plot level. But yeah, the filmmaking is fantastic. It's a brilliant film, both the screenwriting and the directing. I was expecting more of a classic horror film of like just stitching together scary set pieces. So, everything that wasn't a scary set piece is just like connective tissue to tie together the scary set pieces. But there's not that many actual scary set pieces. Almost everything in this film is plot and character. The first half of the movie is just like really getting to know Vera Farmiga, Peter Sarsgaard, the family setup, this girl, how she interacts with people. And it's just great scene after great scene. Like it's really, really well done. The acting is fantastic. I've always liked Vera Farmiga, and I adore Peter Sarsgaard. I think both of them do really, really good work. And like, in a way, you could take it for granted that good actors are doing good work, but we've seen so many people kind of switch off a bit when they do schlock. But these two actors act. Certainly Vera Farmiga. I think Vera Farmiga acts in this as committed and as like she commits to it to the level of if she'd been cast in like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie or something. It really elevates schlocky genre films when the people involved respect the work and just actually go, no, let's still do our best work. It really sings the whole thing, and then you can just enjoy that schlocky goodness all the more because you're just all the more immersed in it. Now, I love Peter Sarsgaard as an actor. The annoying thing is the character is the crux of my big complaint with the film. So we've seen obviously 1,000 films where the hero or the protagonist, the main character, finds out that someone is bad or something is wrong really early in the movie. And all they'd have to do is just tell the powers that be, whether it's their nearest and dearest or the police or whoever it might be. All they'd have to do is tell them that. And the jig's up, game's over, movie's over, everybody happy, nobody gets hurt, everybody go home. But the blocker in place is that nobody believes them and everyone thinks that they're crazy. And, remember you bought that bottle of wine or you did this, you did like their character is called to question. And the more they push for a reception to what they're saying, the more the universe sort of pushes back on them and they become like a pariah and they become, end up in a mental institution or something like that. I think I find that quite boring to watch. I find it quite contrived from a screenwriting perspective. It so often feels like you're doing this because mechanically you have to do this rather than it's coming from a true organic place of characters interacting and a believable world. And for me, it's a big place where this film falls down. The husband character in this is so monstrous in how unsupportive he is and how little faith he has in her testimony and how blinded he is to the situation that it breaks the illusion a bit of it being a real world because it's sort of like, well, what was their relationship? What was their love founded on? He just, for considering how well-rounded a character, both on the page and then combined with the performance Vera Farmiga gives you, Sarsgaard is very let down by the script. And as much as he's a very good actor and he can do his best to try and sell this stuff, it just doesn't work for me. So it's that, and then you get that with Margot Martindale as well, where just like randomly she's teamed up with him and has like ordered some sort of like sectioning of Vera Farmiga. It's the same. His mother, I think, makes more sense because like that's the classic mother-in-law trope, and fine, she's not in it that much. But yeah, the whole Sarsgaard thing and the not believing it definitely is the thing that prevents this film from being like perfect. If that wasn't in this film, then this would just be like a absolutely amazing horror film. Like horror film, it's not scary in my opinion at all. So it's more of a thriller. I think we watched Single White Female recently, and it feels, even though it's obviously not an erotic thriller, but it feels in that kind of like relationship thriller or domestic thriller genre more than a horror film for some reason to me. But for the type of sort of trashy, heading down to the video rental shop and I just want some thrills and I want to, really entertaining fun Friday night, it's perfect other than that one complaint for me. Um, but yeah, I think the way the film like establishes all these little details, like her journal or the roses that have been planted in Jessica's, like where her ashes are scattered, and then like starts to pay off on all the details. You know, when you see her introduced to Esther painting all these like quite nice pictures, and you know that's going to pay off. Where her painting pictures is going to come back in a different way, and her neck ribbon thing is going to come back in a different way, and this girl that sort of makes a comment about little Bo Peep when she shows up at school, that's coming back. Like everything's set up and pay off, and it's very predictable in many ways because it's like um it is a sort of formulaic horror film to a large extent, but it's just all done so well. It's all filmed so well. He's so good with his camera work. That final speeding towards the house chase scene, or it's not a chase scene, but high speed car scene, Vera Farmiga driving through the snow, is just so good looking. It's so intense. I love that the film is set in a snowy environment. I never actually picked up on where it's set exactly, but the fact that they set it in a very striking and specific climate or environment where the house is up in the hill and snowy, and this he's an architect, so it's a very iconic house. Like it has a lot of visual identity to it while still being a very recognizably studio horror film. Yeah, that all worked really well. I loved the slow teasing out of her character, like that scene where the son shoots the pigeon with a paintball, and then Esther comes along and kind of adds to that scene with like picking up the rock and all that, and talking to him, and it's little moments like that that just like inch by inch escalate the film, establishing character all the way. So it's not just like the character's established and it's escalating how far they'll go. It's more like giving us more of a deeper understanding of them. I love the detective side of things, of her tracking down this mental institution in Estonia and getting context. And, as I said, I'd kind of predicted what the outcome of that would be. But even still, I love a kind of, let's get to the bottom of this. When you've got the antagonist who's successfully managed to hide everything from your heroes, and then the heroes manage to actually uncover the truth about the antagonist against the antagonist's will. That's always a really nice kind of cat and mouse type thing. Watched that recently with The Pope's Exorcist, which you recommended to me, where the antagonist, which in that case is a demon, is somewhat reliant on the exorcist not knowing his name and not knowing specifically what demon he is. And then Russell Crowe is able to kind of do some of his detective work and piece things together and then get the breakthrough. And then that's the magic ingredient he needs to be able to finally get kind of parity with the demon. So yeah, always good when a detective mystery thing finds its way into one of these movies, which it often does. If we're talking like single white female and that kind of thing, there's often an element of like, let's get to more context on this person. The way that they managed to mess with the girl's image later on in the movie. Now it's a bit risque having the character, because it's not like the actress in this has this genetic condition where she's like looks like she's a kid. It literally is a kid. But at the end of the movie, she's playing a 33-year-old woman. So they explore her sexuality, and she's wearing all like makeup and everything. And then they have her as a woman, with kind of more wrinkles and her messed up teeth and everything like that. And, you have to kind of, well, you maybe not in the moment you do, but afterwards you go, that is still a cute little child actress now playing a more monstrous adult. But it's great horror iconography, isn't it? It's great to get all of these powerful images as you get into the end of the movie, and to have it, we've seen this a million times in horror, but have it so that when you come down to the final chase sequence, the Nemesis character looks more horrific and grotesque than ever before in the film. So yeah, that all worked for me really well. Even things like the film opens, and I think it's like Dark Castle is the production company, and I can't remember the studio that made it, but when you see those logos, I think it was Warner's maybe, when you see those logos at the beginning of the movie, they've got all these like really crazy neon, like day glow paint splatter things all over them. And I was like, am I watching a fucking Harley Quinn movie or something? This really doesn't feel like the aesthetic you'd get with like a 2000s horror film like that, especially all the posters and everything. It looked more just like your classic kind of gothic, very desaturated kind of color palette. And then later on, there's a paintball scene that, oh, right, okay. So the reason that those colors were at the beginning of the movie is going to be because the end of this movie is going to be very paintball heavy. I was imagining, I didn't know how that was going to play out, but it's like, okay, they've established paintball as a thing that can happen in this film, so maybe that's where it's going. And then when you finally get the like reveal of like what she's doing with her black light painting techniques, of course it's stupid. Like it's ridiculous in a way, because why would she do that in a room where the parents could just walk in at any time and with the fish tank see what she's up to? But I don't care about that personally. If you care about that, then fine. Like personally, that's the type of thing where I'm like, that is fun enough to have earned its place in the movie, even if it doesn't make any sense, kind of thing. But it's another great, powerful image that you get later in the movie. So yeah, just plenty of tricks up its sleeve. I'm now foaming at the mouth for the sequel, or prequel, which I think it is. I don't know when I'll watch it, because I always have a thing with horror movies. Do I watch it as soon as possible, or do I save it for next year's Halloween horror movies? Because I don't know, it might be awful. I don't think, Colette Sarah didn't come back, so that immediately robs it of one of the best things that's going on in this film. But yeah, it would be interesting to see what else they do with this film. And it's just such a great idea. It's a great concept. It's also, I guess, not that many horror films have a great plot twist. And even though I predicted what the plot twist was, I still adore it. I still think it's a brilliant idea. It might be a better experience if you just get that completely, the rug pulled out from under your feet. Another thing I really liked in this film actually is the way she gains control of the home. So she like really, it's clear to her instantly that she can win over Max, the little kid, that little kid desperately wants a sister, and thought she had a sister on the way. And then of course there was the stillbirth. She goes, okay, that's my in with this kid. And then later on it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to get Max even more like silent, like under my spell. So I'm gonna kind of make her feel like she's done something wrong by helping with the murder of CCH Pounder. And then I'm going to go even further later on in the movie, where she whispers in Max's ear, if you tell, I'm going to shoot your mother. It's like she's always managing her, like what she has control over. She does a similar thing with the brother. The brother hates her at the beginning, but she still finds the right. It's almost like Mad Men or something, where she's like carefully finding the right way to ensure that she has she's in the driving seat. And she's really sweet with the dad, and she's always kind of looking to fill a void for people, and she doesn't manage to get there with Vera Farmiga. That she and then it's kind of like, well, if I can't win someone over, then kill them, kind of thing. That's really well done, and it ultimately makes a lot of sense when you think about the fact that it's a 33-year-old woman. When they said 33, I was like, oh man, you should have made her like 63 or something. Like 33 is old for the character you think she is. Is still a young woman. Make it so that she's just like, she's been out there for fucking decades, hopping from country to country, family to family, just doing this over and over and over again. But yeah, I don't know. It's still a great idea. So yeah, very, very pleased with this one. Of this year's slate. It's the 20th of October right now, so it's my 20th horror film of the month, and this would go right up there, right up amongst the absolute best ones that I've seen this month. As I said, it's not a film that I found scary, so a horror film that I actually find scary will always kind of that will eclipse this. But as a thriller, which I think if you gave this to people more as a thriller than as a horror film, then it has more potential. But yeah, I feel like it must be an underrated film because I think it's been popular with audiences, like regular people, but I don't think I've ever heard critics talk about this film. And maybe it's just too trashy a movie to have been embraced by critics, but really great movie. And watching it the day after I did a revisit to The Sixth Sense, and it's interesting going from a movie where it's a little kid in trouble and you feel so protective of the kid and you're so concerned for the kid's well-being, to then going straight into a movie again about a kid, seemingly in the opening of the movie, a kid in trouble. Both times it's like, this is a kid that's experienced real trauma and hardship, and how can we, as adult characters, whether it's Vera Farmiga or Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense, how can we like look after this kid and improve their life? But one completely demonizing the kid and the other one like with immense sympathy for the kid. So yeah, interesting contrast there, and interesting to see two kid-centric horror adjacent films, or I guess horror films over the last 2 days. So yeah, let me know what you thought of it. Hope you liked it as much as I did, or at least liked it, because yeah, really worked for me.
Hey man, just getting back to you a few days after you've seen The Orphan. Yeah, I thought it was really good. It's a movie that I heard of at the time. Certainly, I wasn't traveling. I was in London like I am now. It's just the type of movie I would never be interested in on paper. And in fact, when you sent me the voice note, probably because I saw a 37-minute voice note from you, or however long it is, it tipped me off to, oh, okay, this guy liked this movie a lot to write or to send 37 minutes about this, or he could hate it, but he also pitched it to me that it was quite easy to watch because I haven't been feeling too well lately. I don't really want to watch movies that give me a lot of anxiety or just set me off. So I said I'd give this movie a chance. And yeah, liked it a lot. It very much falls under the category that I do believe you coined when we watched Single White Female, and that's the life invasion movie. Just a few things you said to get back to. with the ethics of don't adopt children because of this movie. And I think there was some controversy about it where people were saying that it's not a good look to exploit this, and they changed the tagline from it's uh it's hard to love a child that's not your own. They changed that to mommy, I don't think mommy loves me, something like that. Um you made the point for it. It's a conversation that I won't be having because I couldn't care less about that stuff. But the reason why I am bringing it up is to say, number one, I wouldn't have ever given them about that. But number two, and more importantly, which is my main point, was I thought from the start that this was going to be a devil's daughter situation. It never occurred to me for 1 minute that I'd be watching a movie with a, well, first of all, just the child that's troubled, let alone with the twist that an adult would be the child. And what I was, for whatever reason, I just went on to Rotten Tomatoes to just see where this film is rating wise as well, to see if I actually did want to watch it as well, if it was one of those really low rating ones, just because I wasn't feeling well in horror. Ain't my bag. And someone said, oh, when it gets to the spoiler, or sorry, when it gets to the twist in the last 20 minutes, and I was thinking, for fuck's sake, why would you put that in the review? So I had that in my head, but I never got close to what this film was going to reveal until very, very late. And in fact, the pacing and the directing is so good that I almost began to doubt the reviewer, or if I even read that there was a twist, because the pacing and the way this film is set out doesn't indicate that there will be a twist, which is a great uh credit to the director, who I also like his Liam Neeson films like Non-Stop and Run All Night. Didn't like The Shallows as much, and I think he did Black Adam as well, but I might be getting confused with the screenwriter of this. So I would avoid this movie like the plague normally, because I've seen Damien, I've seen movies like that where, oh, something wrong with the kid, beginning to think he's not normal, beginning to think he's, or she in this case, is supernatural. So you seem to not have that experience at all, since you're more grappling with the mental well-being of the child early on, and if this is exploitative. I didn't even engage with that because that didn't even occur to me. I was thinking, okay, this kid is the fucking devil spawn, literally, and we're going to find out at some point. And I feel like, at least for me, maybe I was misreading the cues, because first of all, I thought this was a spin-off to the Conjuring universe as well, for whatever reason, because I saw Vera Farmiga. That was quickly dispelled, but that might have primed me. But also, you see her with the Holy Bible and pictures of all these families as it's revealed, although there's just one picture to begin with. So you're thinking, evil looking Bible. What's that got to do with stuff? Maybe it wasn't the Bible, but I'm nearly sure it was. And then when she is in the orphanage, it's established that by CCH Pounder that, oh, I've never really had problems with this kid. Maybe when her ribbons or whatever was taken off her once. And I'm thinking, what the hell is that? Something that keeps her from going absolute batshit crazy or insane? Or like, I was already putting these pieces together. And Pounder also had a look about her early on that maybe made you think, oh, don't take this kid. There's something wrong with this kid, but she wasn't quite sure, and more so that she just suspected it. And then when we get the backstory, oh, her previous family were burnt in the fire, I'm thinking, yeah, definitely the devil's fucking daughter or something. And think when they were saying, oh, anyone she was around dies horribly, I'm thinking this is Damien. This is Damien true and true. But it's a credit to the film that even though I suspected that was it kept me very much interested all the way through with the story, and what I caught it was withholding never came, but I was never really bored by what I was waiting for it to happen in the reveal. First of all, the film opens very strongly with that fucked up birth sequence when she's having that weird dream about her miscarriage. That is really sets the scene for uneasiness. And then I really like and speaking of evil, the movie that I was raving about recently does this very well as well. I really like movies that present the family one way, like, oh, this is a perfect family. And I was really on board and invested with the family. I guess that's why, while I was waiting for the devil daughter to reveal herself, I was so engrossed, because to begin with, we get that horrible sequence with Vera Farmiga's nightmare. Then we just see a very nice family. We see the daughter coming home, Max, and she's a really cute kid, and she's got hearing problems. And then we get that scene early on where she's teaching her about the fact that her sister is in heaven, and just the bitter tragedy of that, where Max loves the story, but it's just such a tragic thing to have to tell a child, and she's shielded from the reality of what the mother is feeling, I guess, and that makes us more invested in her character as well. And then we see the son, and then obviously Sarsgaard is really good as well, and we just really like the family, and it really makes you nervous for what's gonna happen. And I do agree that when really good actors like Vera Farmiga and Sarsgaard are committed to this type of thing, it makes it really good. Like they're doing some serious good work as treating this as something like Shawshank level of prestige film. I'm really gonna sell this movie. So I agree with you on that. And then when they're at the orphanage early on, and then the movie does a really a good way of showing Sarsgaard's connection with the little kid, and then the mother comes, and then you see them interacting in a very nice way, very nice character moments early on. It really builds it quite well. And the actress is Isabella Fuhrer. I can't remember what her name is. The kid, uh, she's very good and very charming early on as well. And then she comes into the family, and then you see Max's face light up and just watching her interact. And obviously the kid is the boy is a little bit standoffish, but it's just very interesting family dynamics. So that's always very much engrossing as well. And the directing, he does a very good job. Sorry, I think my cat is trying to get into the bedroom again. 1 second. Come on then. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so director does this very good job of, as I nearly fall over as I get back into bed, the director does a very good job of setting up things that aren't quite jump scares, but it's almost like I'm going to show you a door. It's going to be framed in such a way that you're going to presume someone is going to be there, but it's not going to be there. And then sometimes he does the same thing where you presume they're not going to be there, but they are there. But he's constantly drawing attention to these shots, and it's not exactly a jump scare, because more often than not, there is no jump scare. It's a complete fake out, and it just keeps you wondering about the character of this woman, or this girl, should I say. And they do these nice little things as well to keep you on edge. And I agree with you that it's not a very scary movie, but the scene where she goes into the bathroom and she locks the door and she starts saying, "Oh, I'll sing for you, so you'll know I'm there." And then when Vera Farmiga is looking in that Bible, you hear her singing, but she manages to be also near the room. So I don't know if that's some skill she picked up, but it made me again think, oh, this is some supernatural shit. When maybe she's going to have a bath to take off that neck and arm thing, and I don't know, she can't keep her evilness under check or something. I don't know. It was just constantly keeping me on edge and guessing. So I really like that aspect of it as well. Now, oh yeah, and another really good thing that this is as well, the character of Max the whole time. Obviously, she's not the best actor, that little kid, but they managed to bring Max along to all these scenes where she witnessed someone getting bashed in with a hammer. She witnesses fucking her dad gets stabbed to death. She witnesses all these things and being brought along and up to the treehouse as well, and they managed to get away without the cutesy wootsy thing where you're just thinking, oh no, this poor kid. And it's a great trick the movie has up its sleeve, because it's not, she just is a cute kid that is acting like a kid in these situations, and her ability not to act is almost a strength, because she can't act particularly well in a lot of these scenes, but it almost feels like how a kid might be without being able to process what's happening. And the fact she can't hear as well adds to that. Now, I am in the same boat as you when it comes to the trope of no one believes the main character. I really hate that trope, and many a good movie has been ruined by that just whole thing of the character, such as Vera Farmiga, beating the head against the wall in this, where you're thinking, oh man, come on. But in this, I actually disagree with you. I think the movie did a very good job of making the case for why you would believe her in this case at all. First of all, her daughter died. She's alleging that a little kid is a psychopath, which outside of the horror movie genre is a pretty insane thing to allege. She is in AA. She was drinking and is seen to maybe be drinking again when you find those bottles. You're not really going to give the benefit of that of someone who has two bottles or with a history, and when they nearly let your kid drown in a pool, well, an ice place out the back because they were not being responsible, then they seem to break someone's arm. And then when Sarsgaard does seem to not say give her the benefit of the doubt, but listen to her for a second and say, okay, we're gonna go to the therapist with the kid. The kid totally charms the therapist, which was Vera Farmiga's suggestion in the first place. And then it's not just Peter Sarsgaard thinking it now. The therapist who Vera Farmiga is going to for ages has now given the seal of approval that no, there's nothing wrong with the kid, and she's a trained professional, and and obviously it just goes to show you how good what's her name, Estrella, just how good of a manipulator she is, that she's able to pull one over on the therapist. So at that stage, and the pent up resentment and the actual shaky ground their marriage is on, I did buy it quite well that he would have that reaction. And also he seems kind of a bit of a gormless character that's not particularly strong willed. He's a bit frustrated. He's trying to have sex, it's getting interrupted. He's not really paying attention to the world almost. He's a bit, not to say he's ditzy, but Sarsgaard does it in that way of a guy that you can't count on. He carries himself like that quite often. So I think personally that he nails the assignment for the most part. So I can't really complain about that. And as somebody who doesn't like that trope in general as well. So that's just my experience on this. Now, how I experienced the twist, like I said, I had read that something was going to happen. And then by the time it got to that point where I was expecting something to happen, I thought, okay, I guess now is where we're going to get some of this demon shit. And then when she dresses up as an older woman, per se, I start to think, wait, is there a possibility that this isn't a kid? And at that point, then it was revealed slowly after. I like the fact that they pulled the trigger as well with the killing of Sarsgaard, because up until that point, yes, CCH Pounder was pounded with a hammer, but we weren't getting a lot of deaths. We were getting that kid surviving twice. I mean, the brother character, we were getting the threat of something. So maybe I was thinking, okay, are we watching we watching a 12s here? We watching is this much more of a less R-rated movie than I thought? Maybe it's just as more of a movie where it doesn't really pull the trigger in that way. But then when he got brutally stabbed, boy, do you feel that, because it's quite restrained with the gore and the violence. And he kind of deserves, it's that classic thing of horror movie characters, isn't it? It's that trait of, well, you didn't listen, so you're gonna have to be the one to die. So there was that conclusion. And yeah, I also agree with you that I like that getting to the bottom of things mystery, and like Jess missing the phone call, this great scene where she's driving in the snow, bombing down to save her family. It reminded me a little bit of that scene in Prisoners where Jake Gyllenhaal is driving with blood over his eye. That type of drama that you can get from straight up driving scene. It's good that directors can do that. And I thought the conclusion was pretty cool as well, where at this stage, like you said, that all gloves are off and you can see the ugly side of that character, except in this case, it's because she's a bit older. You start taking out the teeth and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. And yeah, I felt it just went a bit too final beat of the horror movie bad guy, and that's kind of what I didn't like. So we get this great scene where Vera Farmiga jumps down on the glass and she lands on the girl, who's now revealed to be a woman. Then we know she's going to be missing at that stage and come back. And there's a cool scene where she comes out of nowhere and runs into Vera Farmiga in the snow. That was quite scary. Then there's a fight on the ice. And then it just went on a little bit too long. It does that thing of that lack of restraint. Now, this movie might be schlock, but I think it done such a good job of everything right that a moment like that would stand out a little bit more in a lesser movie. Or than a lesser movie, shall we say. Like, if that happened in a movie that was just not good or even decent, I wouldn't have minded it. But just because this movie was very good, by the time she comes out of the ice a second time and stabs her in the leg, because we've got to get that line, "I'm not your mother, bitch," or whatever she says. That was just a little bit too much for me, but minor complaint. But yeah, I'm very glad I've seen this movie, and not really interested in the prequel, but glad I got to see this.
Yeah, I agree that they do one too many resuscitations or whatever for Esther. Esther is her name, by the way. You call her Estella and Estrella in that voice message, coining new names. But yeah, Esther does come back to life one too many times. But I mean, in this kind of a movie, in this kind of like a cheesy mainstream horror movie, I guess I'm just completely inoculated from that trope. Like that's a given. And yeah, in a way it's dumb, but in another way it means you get a bit more fun with the movie. Yeah, glad you had a really good time with it. I've obviously I agree with most of what you said. We clearly differ a bit on how reasonable it was to not believe her. And my memory is hopeless, and we're now a couple of days away from having seen the movie, and I've seen a few movies since then, so I'm kind of a bit less clinical on the details of exactly what she was claiming and what it felt to me watching it. And again, I can't really back this up with examples now, but it felt to me like she was pointing at very direct, suspicious things. I get that accusing a kid of being like a murderer, psycho, whatever is like really fucking sus, but it felt like she was pointing at very strange things that deserved more scrutiny and attention, and he was just like extremely dismissive of that. And some of the things you said there about like how she's an alcoholic and stuff, I don't really buy that. Like, she hasn't drunk for years as far as I'm aware. She's they find the wine, and it's like she's I think within a marriage you would expect that if you're an alcoholic and the person finds a bottle of wine and you say, "Yep, you know that I'm at the end of my tether. I bought a bottle of wine in a moment of desperation and I didn't drink it," people would take that on face value. But anyway, I don't know. It just felt like right from the get-go, he wasn't in her corner at any point. He was always adversarial, dismissive, unsupportive. It wasn't like to me, it didn't feel like he had initially tried to be on her side, but Esther had been such an incredible manipulator that she had managed to kind of create that divide and win that power struggle gradually over time. It just felt like it was like maybe missing one or two narrative beats to get Sarsgaard to the level of on Esther's side and against Vera Farmiga that he is for the whole movie. But anyway, that's that's the thing. That's the thing that's my big complaint about the movie. As I said, it does go to the therapist. You could say that, she Esther puts on such a good show when she meets the therapist that she kind of conquers the therapist, but that also doesn't really, that feels a little bit too easily earned. But of course, when you get to the end of the movie and you realize that this is a 33-year-old woman, and not just a 33-year-old woman, but like someone who's been doing this routine over and over again with family after family and has become, an expert at manipulation and deceit and all that. Well, then, maybe it is a bit more credible how easily she's able to get everyone wrapped around her finger. Just to go through some of the points that you mentioned there in your voice note. I also always assume when I see a horror movie poster of a little kid, that we're dealing with possession stuff, and specifically satanic possession, Christian horror. Like, that's exactly what I assumed this film was. Like, it goes beyond thinking about it. It's more just like instant recognition. The second I see the poster, like, it doesn't even cross my mind that it's not a possession movie. So yeah, I'm sure that was a part of my lack of interest in the film. It's just not a genre that does it for me at all. So going into this film, I would have definitely assumed it was supernatural. And yeah, finding out that it's not supernatural, it's just pure a bad person, is great, because that's my favorite thing that a horror movie can ever be, is just a story of a bad person, to put it in the most reductive terms possible. I also agree that the family is super likable at the beginning, and I'm sure we've both seen countless horror films that don't get you giving a shit about the family. Now, this has two brilliant actors as the mother and father, and decent kid actors, which is not, it's not always a given. A lot of the time, well, fine, it's not like that they're terrible actors, but they just don't give you anything to latch onto on a character level, and they seem like cardboard cutouts. They're just completely unrealized on a character level. And in this one, there's a lot of interesting writing, and there's a lot of good acting to kind of back that up. Like all of the family history, the fact it's like he's had an affair, but they go a detail beyond that. He's had an affair, but it was years ago, which he only found out 2 years ago. So there was a prolonged period of deception there, and these are details that are very only very briefly alluded to. Even this like thing that's gone down on the lake when she was drunk and Max almost died on the lake. Like, at first I was thinking, oh, is that how Max got deaf? But no, Max has been deaf since birth, right? So it's not like someone died at the lake. Jessica didn't die at the lake. Jessica was stillborn. So nothing actually happened at the lake, but it was a scare for the family, and she's had an alcoholic past, but it's not like they don't sledgehammer you with exposition. A lot of the time in this movie, she used to teach at Harvard, I think, and she's thinking about doing piano lessons, and there's just little details throughout the film. Like, for example, he's an architect, and we don't see that much of that, but it kind of, that in combination with the house and the nature of the house, which is it's not just like a pure aesthetic, like just throw in a cool looking house to make it more visually striking. It's also specifically a house that allows for a lot of voyeurism, people watching from different angles, looking down, looking out, loads of windows, glass, places where you can feel that you're not being watched, but then you are being watched, or places where you can watch other bad stuff going on. And like, there's a lot of different ingredients going on in this film that are not like, they don't scream through a megaphone at you what the content of the film is. They give it to you more naturally and more delicately, but it all works really well and draws you in and gets you invested. So before the bad shit happens, we are interested and we care about the life of this family. As you said, when they're driving up to the orphanage and they're going, and obviously whether it's possession or what, that getting this kid is going to be a bad thing for them ultimately. I'm already feeling a little bit like, oh man, like you've just gone through this really hard time with this stillbirth. You're such a lovely family, everything, like, just pick a different kid. The fact that the movie is remotely getting me to give that much of a shit about the family is very unusual for this kind of like a big popcorn studio movie. So yeah, I really appreciated that. On the subject of Isabel Fuhrman, her acting, she's good. She does a good job. She has a lot to do in the movie. She has a lot more, is revealed that she has a lot more to do, because if you think back over the course of the movie and you sort of like reappropriate the scenes in your head, she's actually being tasked with playing a 33-year-old pretending to be a kid. And that doesn't necessarily change the performance wholesale, but it is part of it. And there's a lot of things that came to my head afterwards that were like, oh, that scene is different when I think about that this is someone coming from a place of over 3 decades of life and experience talking. But the other cool thing that she does is she speaks with an accent. I wasn't when she's introduced and she starts speaking, I'm like, what's this accent? That's not an American accent. And then it's revealed that she's from another country, and we eventually find out she's Estonian, but it's like, from the majority of the film, we're taking it that she's Russian. And I found out after the movie that she just has an American accent. She's not, as far as I'm aware, she's got nothing to do with Russia or Estonia. She's just, an American child actress who I think does a pretty good job with the accent throughout for her age. That was impressive. Also, just on that subject, really like the fact that she's from another country. Again, it's a detail that helps the movie, but also gets her more mysterious from the get-go. They could have done this movie where she was from like one state over or whatever, and it's still just like slowly tease out her background. But the fact that she's come from somewhere that's so disconnected from America and from like the communication network and like medical records and everything like that just helps the film a lot. And you're talking about some of these kind of like misdirection scares they do, which is becoming a bit of a trope now, I feel. This movie is 15 years old, but I think now I'm seeing it almost too much in horror films, where they like open the fridge door and then the music gets louder, and they close the fridge door and nothing's there, and it's like a reverse jump scare, where the jump scare is like doing the whole big hoopla for no reason. This is like doing the whole big setup without the hoopla, but for no reason. So it doesn't feel as trashy, but if you see it enough times, it can become its own form of frustration. But yeah, it's mostly done well here. I think that misdirection thing is something that beyond the sort of horror camera work and stuff, just in terms of on a narrative level, they do a fair bit of that. They do, like, with this, is it going to be a possession movie thing? I don't know how intentional that is. I'm not sure if it's at all intentional. Like you said, she does carry around a scary little Bible with her, but the film is like good at making you focus on different things and kind of directing your attention around. So I think that's overall a strength of the film. And the you're talking about how, like, when she takes off the ribbons, is that going to be part of her, like, coming into her true form as a spawn of Satan or whatever? I love how they use those, like that neck ribbon and her hand ribbon things as a scare. It's like I don't know if scary is the right word. Masks are scary, right? It's the unknown. And whenever someone covers up their body, usually in a horror film, their face, it's scary because you don't know what's under there. So they're human walking around, but they're obscuring part of them, which means that you now have to grapple with them as like a physical silhouette standing there, but also the unknown potential of what they really are. And the ribbons are like a really subtle version of that, because, okay, you can see she's a little girl, you can see her face, like most of her is plain to see. But with that little bit of her hidden, and with this, like, they built it up in a nice way, so you know that there's more there, right? There's gotta be something underneath those ribbons. It just keeps her as an entity, like physically, a bit unknown, not just in terms of her background, but actually like what we're physically dealing with. And obviously, when you get to the twist at the end, it's like, you know, her on a biological level, she is something quite different to what we anticipated. I love when we do have that context of the twist, thinking back, and it came into my head the next day, the sex scene, or not the sex scene, but the aftermath scene where Vera Farmiga goes to her and it's like, honey, sometimes when, man and woman love each other, and she goes, yeah, you were fucking. And it's like, when you think about, you've got this 33-year-old woman in your house, and she's like, her viewing them, because when we see that scene of her seeing them having sex, it's like, we don't know how she's processing that or what. Like, we can kind of assume that she is different to your average kid, but also she is ultimately a kid, and how she gonna how much does she understand it or something. But if you think back, it's like, no, she's full understanding, full adult appreciation of what's going on. Another example, and I think an even better example, is when she's on the swing with Sarsgaard, and that neighbor woman comes up and starts flirting with him, and they're conducting this little flirtatious exchange in a way that's incredibly overt to adult eyes. We're obviously adults watching the movie, and it's like incredibly clear what kind of vibe they're operating on, and what the subtext of everything that they're kind of saying about, like, come over the door and blah blah blah. But they're deliberately doing it in a way that, and it's quite clumsily done. They clearly they don't care too much about obscuring it, but they're using some amount of subterfuge to prevent the child audience from understanding the context of what's going on. But then again, you go back and you replay that scene in your head. They've got a 33-year-old woman sat on the swing between them with a full understanding of what's going on between them. And so, of course, she's able to testify to Vera Farmiga. This is back when she's like on her side, and she hasn't kind of lost Vera's supports or alignment or whatever. The same thing is like when she goes, like you said, to manipulate the shrink. It must be easier to manipulate people when they think you're a kid, so you can like, I don't know, you can definitely play all the right tunes, and they, if they knew you're an adult, then have a completely different, they'd be much more suspicious or whatever of you being manipulated, but they'll probably take a lot more things on face value if they're like, well, she's just a kid. How could she like make all that up or whatever? Yeah. And then I think it's the subject of like how sort of PG-13 the film is, where it's not many people are getting killed. And then we get Sarsgaard getting brutally killed. I mean, to be fair, the killing of CCH Pounder is pretty brutal as well. So I think the film has, I presume it has quite a low certificate because of just it's the mainstream nature of the film. But when it does go for like the kill, when it goes in for the kill, it doesn't massively pull punches. Of course, you could always go more graphic, more gory, but I don't think it needs to. It's not that kind of a film. But I think the fact that it's not a complete bloodbath where she's killing like 20 people and she's killing like every doctor and police person that shows up to the house and like all of these like filler kill scenes, to me that improves the film in a way, because if we're taking her history, and again, I think this is very similar to The Stepfather, and there's a few other films like it, like a bit single white female, although it does, I think in the case of single white female, she doesn't have like a litany of murders in her past, but still it's a grounded, more domestic serial killer type idea. And I think that works better in the mold of this person has killed a lot of people. They've been doing it for years. They've been moving from family to family, but realistically, they're only killing like one or two people every year or something, which is still shitloads, but we're keeping it more in the serial killer realm than in the Jason or Michael Myers realm of the sort of supernatural type of slasher thing. So I think the amount of kills that happen in the movie worked for me because it's more of a tension, suspense, Hitchcockian type of narrative drama experience than it is a slasher movie. And just on a final point, it's funny that you mentioned that car scene, that chase, or driving through the snow scenes reminded you of Prisoners, because that's exactly what it reminded me of. When we were in that scene, I was like, this is so that scene in Prisoners, and I think would predate it, or not 100% sure. I think Prisoners is like 2013. Not to say that Prisoners ripped this off or anything, but it is a very striking scene in this movie. It's really well shot and it's really intense. And I think getting Vera Farmiga from the hospital, where she gets the phone call and everything, and it's completely remote from the situation, to the house, is something that you would not expect to be one of the most visually interesting and thrilling parts of the movie. You'd expect it to be like obligatory couple of second unit shots of car driving along, but really don't focus it. And I think it's just perfect example of Jean-Claude Serra's capabilities, that he makes basic depicting the space and orientating and almost like filler material so stylish and so elevated that you kind of just feel like from start of movie to end of movie, you're always getting a consistent stylish experience. So yeah, good movie. I'm being kind of, it's been a few days since I've watched it, but it's matured quite nicely in my head. Like your classic twist movie experience, where first you watch the movie, then the next day you kind of rewatch the movie in your head with the new information. And yeah, glad you enjoyed it. I'll let you know if I do watch the prequel, which I don't think it's very highly regarded, and I kind of doubt it will be anything too special, but my main point of interest in it is just seeing this actress who now, I guess, probably is around 33, or if it's a prequel, maybe in the prequel she's like 29 and then the actress really is 29, but she's playing a younger character than in the first movie, and sort of seeing how they pull that off could be interesting. But yeah, I'll let you know how I fare with that.
Hey man, just taking a break after my work for a minute and just waiting out to book tickets for the Wild Robot for Saturday, which I'm looking forward to, taking my niece there and my partner. Yeah, I really like what you said about the house being open to voyeurism, and it's almost built around that concept, isn't it? With the glass, the Scandinavian type of architecture, the stairs in proximity to the kitchen, and just people being able to look out windows, and it's got that conservatory at the end as well. That's reminiscent of, again, Don't Breathe, a movie that's come up quite a lot lately. And yeah, it just lends itself to that in a very cool way, doesn't it? And not just the house itself, the setting in the back. We've got the pond that's frozen over. We've got the flowers. I think that's in the conservatory as well. And then we've got the tree house. So the whereabouts and bearings of the house at all times lends quite a lot to it as well. So yeah, that's a very good point. We talked about People Under the Stairs not so long ago and how that house is really built well as well. But in this, it feels like very much a real house, a natural house that they've managed to build all these things around, which is fantastic. And just to go back to the Sarsgaard character being a kind of blocker, I do agree that he is adversary like in his setup, that's for sure. But I just bought that the character would do that, and that's the credit to Sarsgaard. Maybe if they cast someone else, it might seem like more of a problem for me in the way that it was a problem to you, although you ultimately really enjoyed the movie. I think he does such a good role, and there's that much character behind his acting that I just kind of think, yeah, this husband might do that. He seems like the type who wouldn't believe his wife. He seems like the type who's never really forgiven her, never really trusted her for what she did in the past, and never really got over that, and seems quite checked out. And he doesn't have much faith in his wife. I buy that the character would do that. So I guess that's the main thing, because I hate that trope as well. So good on Sarsgaard. And funnily enough, I think the prequel got good ratings. I checked before this. So it'll be interesting to see if it does live up to that. It's not going to have the same gut wrench punch as the twist that you saw coming, admittedly. But I didn't pop big time for the twist. I didn't go, oh my god. I meant, well, my reaction was much more, oh, that's good. That's good. That's good writing. And there's lots of times where things happen in this movie where you're thinking, that's good writing. Just, it could be, everything in this movie could be done badly. We've probably seen plenty of movies of this done badly, but the writing really helps bolster this movie. Like you said as well, I had the same thought as you, where, oh, just go for another kid, don't adopt this kid. And when you're having thoughts like that, and when you're saying things like that, that's rare. You don't take that lightly, do you? Where you care enough about characters. I have this when I play video games sometimes, uh, where I care enough about the character not to do something to them or not to make that decision. Whereas mostly in video games, I'm thinking, fuck that. That's not a real character. I need to get to my goal. But you like that kind of writing that makes you worry for the characters, like they're somewhat real in some alternative universe that you're viewing it to. That's a trick. But yeah, glad you put it across my desk, and glad I ended up watching it.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.